me for another episode. Today we will be talking about the Deedee Blanchard murder, which I think is more commonly known as the Gypsy Rose case. Gypsy Rose was born in 1991, and when she was just 3 months old, her mother, Deedee Blanchard, began to notice she was having trouble breathing at night. She was soon diagnosed with sleep apnea. Over the next 8 years, Gypsy Rose would suffer from leukemia and muscular dystrophy, which left her wheelchair-bound. She suffered from seizures, asthma, and hearing and visual impairments. She required a feeding tube as well. Gypsy's father, Rod Blanchard, split from Deedee soon after Gypsy was born, although she did keep him informed of their daughter's medical issues. Early on, he was told that Gypsy had been diagnosed with a chromosomal disorder, which had led to her many health issues. Deedee couldn't work because taking care of her disabled and sickly daughter was a full-time job. Gypsy had to be given numerous medications throughout the day. She had undergone multiple surgeries, and her recovery from these took their toll on the young girl. Deedee often had to remind people who were talking to Gypsy that the girl had suffered brain damage as a result of being born prematurely, and that she had the mental capacity of a 7-year-old. Deedee and Gypsy were Hurricane Katrina survivors, and so she and Gypsy received assistance so they were able to relocate from Louisiana to Missouri in 2005. Because they were Hurricane Katrina survivors, they lived in a home that had been built for them by Habitat for Humanity. Their home was located in Springfield, Missouri. It had been painted pink, and it had a wheelchair ramp for Gypsy. The house also had a hot tub to help relieve some of the pain that came from Gypsy's muscular problems. This family had a lot of support from close friends as well as from the entire community. People were often giving the family different things. They were driving them places. They were helping them out, bringing meals in. Deedee homeschooled her daughter, and this left more time open to be able to go to various doctor's appointments that they needed to attend. This also left them open to attend different charity trips, such as one to Disney World. They were able to meet Miranda Lambert through the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and they had a GoFundMe set up to help with the medical expenses as well. Deedee also had this Facebook page set up that was dedicated to Gypsy Rose, and she used this Facebook page to keep everyone informed about the different things that were going on with her daughter. Most of Gypsy Rose's medical records ended up being lost in Hurricane Katrina, so a lot of the doctors who saw her in Missouri did not have like original documents of her diagnoses. Deedee told people that she had actually come from a very abusive family, and that Gypsy's father, who she had been married to for only a short time, had also been abusive. And so that was one of the reasons she had moved to Missouri, to get away from all of this abuse. So everyone felt really sorry for this mother-daughter duo, but they also felt very inspired by them, the way they had just risen above all of the obstacles, and they were really trying to live their best lives. On June 14th, 2005, this very alarming Facebook post was posted to Gypsy Rose's Facebook wall, and it said that someone was dead. And at first, people thought the page must have been hacked, because this just didn't make any sense. But then things got even weirder, because someone commented on the status from Gypsy's Facebook account, and they commented that basically they had killed the fat pig. So people were a little bit panicked when they saw this post, and they called the police. They kind of hoped it was just like a hacker or something, but they really weren't sure what was happening, so they decided to alert police. A search warrant was granted, and police entered the home that night. When they had arrived at the home, they noticed Deedee's van was still in the driveway, and she couldn't have really gone anywhere without her van. It wasn't like Gypsy could walk very far, so they assumed they were home. Sheriff's deputies found the body of Deedee Blanchard face down on her bed. She was lying in a pool of blood from stab wounds that had been inflicted days earlier. And Gypsy Rose was nowhere to be found. Police immediately realized that someone, some stranger, had come into the home and killed Deedee and kidnapped Gypsy. So Gypsy Rose became a missing person. The community was shocked that this could happen to this nice family. They had already been through so much, and no one could believe that someone would want to hurt this sweet, innocent, disabled girl. Police began looking into this Facebook post to see who had written it and where it had come from. They traced the IP address, and it came back to a man named Nicholas Gojon. Police began digging into everything in this family's history, and they found out that this Nicholas was one of Gypsy's friends. The two had been writing messages back and forth on Facebook a few years before Gypsy went missing, and she had confided in this friend that she was in love with him, and they kind of had this online relationship. Now Gypsy was 18 and Nick was 24, and they were both pretty obsessed with each other. relationship from her mother because her mother was so protective of her. So now, years later, Gypsy Rose is missing, and police have just uncovered that this post came from Nick's house. So police go straight to his home. Nick surrendered right away, and he actually confessed to killing Deedee. He says that he killed Deedee because Gypsy asked him to, and he was so in love with Gypsy he would do anything she asked. When police showed up at his house, Gypsy was there with him. She had taken a bus to his house, and police were shocked when Gypsy Rose walked out of Nick's house perfectly fine, no wheelchair in sight. This shocked the entire community. Police held a press conference in which they said that this was still an ongoing investigation. However, things are not always as they appear. Basically, police were realizing that Gypsy's entire life had been a lie. She wasn't sick with cancer or seizures or any of these other medical conditions. It had all been a lie that Deedee had constructed. Munchausen syndrome is a mental disorder when someone will fake medical issues or injuries or diseases and pretend that they have these diseases to get attention or money. This case, Gypsy Rose's case, was a case of Munchausen's by proxy, which is when someone makes someone else feel like they are sick or they make them lie about being sick. When Gypsy was arrested, she told police everything. She tells them that her entire life has been a lie. She has always been able to walk. She never needed a wheelchair. She was not mentally disabled whatsoever. She dressed and acted young because her mother made her, and she would shave her head to make it look like Gypsy was bald from cancer treatments. When Gypsy was arrested, she told police that she was 19 years old, and Gypsy wasn't lying. That's how old she thought she was. However, police would uncover Gypsy's real age. She was 23 years old. Gypsy's father ended up having her birth certificate, which confirmed that she was actually 23. And the lies don't stop here. Deedee had made up this entire story about Gypsy's father being this awful, abusive guy. But he wasn't. He had gotten remarried, he had more children, and he was actually a really nice guy. He wanted to be involved in Gypsy's life, but Deedee had not wanted it that way. Deedee had conned multiple people and charities in several states throughout the years. Her legal name was Blanchard. She had been forcing Gypsy to fake all of these ailments her entire life, and Gypsy didn't even realize the extent problems with her eyesight and hearing right from the beginning. Her family absolutely hated her. They wanted nothing to do with her, and none of them even cared when they learned that Deedee had died. Deedee told people that Gypsy would never live into her 20s. She would probably be dead by the time she was 20. Now, you would think that all of these doctors and specialists that Deedee was dragging her daughter to would have caught on and reported this. Of the hundreds of physicians Gypsy was taken to unnecessarily, only 2 ever seemed to notice that anything was amiss. When Gypsy was 14, her mother had taken her to a neurologist in Missouri who had suspected that Gypsy was a victim of Munchausen by proxy, but he never reported the case to police. He later said that his belief wasn't enough evidence to act. In 2009, an anonymous report was made to the authorities stating that Deedee's accounts of Gypsy's ailments had no medical basis. As a result of this report, 2 caseworkers were sent to the home, but Deedee was able to convince them that she was just trying to find a proper diagnosis for her daughter. So how does this unemployed mother convince doctor after doctor that her daughter is seriously ill? As police dig deeper into this case, they found out that Deedee used to work as a nurse's assistant, and she was actually pretty smart when it came to the medical world. But Deedee had a very troubled past. She had several warrants for her arrest in Louisiana for writing fraudulent checks. She had come from a family of 6 children, and she had taken care of her mother when she was getting older. And according to Deedee's family, she starved her own mother to death. Her family absolutely hated Deedee. They wanted nothing to do with her. Gypsy told police her mother was very abusive toward her, and she had been scared to tell anyone the truth. She told them that if they were ever in a group of people and Gypsy slipped up and said something she wasn't supposed to, her mom would squeeze her hand really, really hard, and she knew she was in trouble. Deedee had this psychological hold over her daughter. She also told police that her mother would hit her with hangers or just with her hand. She was so terrified of her mom, and Deedee had told everyone that Gypsy had brain damage, so Gypsy didn't think anyone would believe her if she did try to tell them what was happening. Dr. Mark Feldman, an expert in Munchausen syndrome by proxy, explained Gypsy's life and kind of her actions by saying, quote, "The control was total in the same sense that the control of a kidnapped victim is total. Her daughter was, in essence, a hostage, and I think we can understand the crime that occurred subsequently in terms of a hostage trying to gain escape." End quote. As investigators looked into police that she felt like the only way she could escape was by having her boyfriend murder her mother. She then told police exactly what had happened the day Deedee died. Nick had arrived at her house while Gypsy and her mother were at a doctor's appointment. After they came home and Deedee went to sleep, Nick returned to the house and Gypsy let him in. She gave him duct tape, gloves, and a knife. Gypsy hid in the bathroom and covered her ears so she wouldn't be able to hear her mother screaming. Nick stabbed Deedee several times in the back while she was sleeping, and then Gypsy and Nick went in Gypsy's room and had sex. They then took $4,000 in cash that Deedee had in the house, and they took off. Gypsy and Nick had taken the bloody murder weapon and mailed it to Nick's house. In the course of interviewing Nick's family, they find out that Nick has pretty severe autism. His mother said that with his diagnosis, he would kind of focus or obsess on one thing and not really see the world as it was. So in this instance, he knew he had to rescue Gypsy. The Facebook status that had been posted was written by Gypsy. She said she had wanted her mother's body to be found. So this is a pretty difficult situation because we have a girl who has been abused and held hostage by her mother, and then you have the killer who has severe autism. After the prosecutors became aware of the extent of abuse Gypsy had suffered, the public began to shift from seeing her as this violent, lying murderer to feeling very sympathetic and realizing Gypsy had been a victim. The prosecutor soon announced he would not be seeking the death penalty for either Gypsy or Nick. Gypsy pled guilty, and she was very honest with police about everything. The prosecutor said that this case was, quote, extraordinary and unusual, end quote, and a plea bargain was secured. Nick faced several charges, but his lawyers argued that he had the intelligence quotient of 82, and because of this and the fact that he was on the autism spectrum, he had diminished capacity. His case ended up going to trial, and he was found guilty of first-degree murder and armed criminal action. He received life in prison for the murder. When later asked by Dr. Phil if Gypsy was glad her mother was dead, Gypsy said, quote, "I'm glad I'm out of this situation, but I'm not happy she's dead." She told 2020 in 2018, quote, "I feel like I'm free in prison rather than living with my mom, because now I'm allowed to just live like a normal woman," end quote. So that was the story of Gypsy Rose and her mother Deedee. Thank you guys so much for joining me this week.